Building a startup from scratch is tough. My name is Justin McLeod, and I'm your host for a new podcast series called Back to the Basics. In this show, I'll be talking to startup experts as they discuss the fundamentals of launching and running your first tech startup.
So you stay rooted in your strong opinion. What does the world look like to you in 5 years? What does that world look like? And when you say it out loud, do people laugh? Do people say, oh, I don't know what you're talking about? That might be a good sign.
Regardless of how smart or talented you are, there are some things that simply can't be taught. And those some things include having confidence, having conviction, and deeply believing in what's clear to you, but uncertain to most. My next guest, Arlan Hamilton, needed all three of those unteachable characteristics to raise her first fund at Backstage Capital with the mission to invest in 100 underestimated startup founders who shared that same mentality. Arlan will share her story of breaking into venture capital along with the mentality needed to be an undeniable startup founder. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, and I think the caveat is first-time fundraisers for their funds if they're under a certain amount. Mm-hmm. Like if anything that's, I would say 50 million or higher is going to be very different than what, like in the trenches. And then outside of that, just had a unique experience in general with Backstage. Mm-hmm. But there are some funds that are like, they put together 10 million, they put together 5, they put together 25. And it took, let's say 18 months to do just every day. And when you have that, like for what I did was I did like a $1.2 million funds, basically 2016, 17, and 18 each. So each year has its own fund. Mm-hmm. And then 2019, 2.2 million for the accelerator. So it's a lot of money when you're building that like 25,000 at a time, like I did. And when you think of it more like those are rounds of funding for a company, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, rather than a fund, because I think that's how people are like, oh, that's not that much money. And I'm like, it may not be that much money to you, but right. Putting that together bit by bit is a lot of money. But then on the model of a fund, your the fee that you get in order to keep the lights on is like 2% a year. Mm-hmm. So 2% on $1 million isn't much to run a whole fund. Mm-hmm. It's not even somebody's salary, right? So I have a lot of that to talk, that I can pull from, and a lot of it's in the book that tells you kind of the negative, but the positive spin on it is that it makes me and the people at Backstage so much more, we can relate so much more to a founder raising mm-hmm. than most venture funds or funds can do, because it's not as structured as a venture fund. We also, though, can kind of see, it's kind of hard to BS a BSer, it's right. Hard to see, because if we've been through it and you're like, this one thing I say in front of investors really, really works on them because they don't know much about how it really came together. And we're like, yeah, we were in the same rooms with you. Right. So we know that thing over there wasn't that hard to do. Be more real, Mm-hmm. So you have that back and forth. But I think, so summary is, I don't think most venture funds are similar to raising for a company. I do think, though, some are, including Backstage.
With that, what kind of sparked having that focus on specifically underrepresented founders? I know, of course, you've seen some stuff in the news or just reading some articles, like say you wanted to make it more representation in the space, but like, what was that like burning like itch where it's like, okay, like I have to get more money towards, this particular group?
Well, I wasn't seeing it a lot in the news. This was 2011 when it was kicking off for me. The idea was kicking off. And it was the fact that I wasn't seeing, I would see little headlines here. I mean, not headlines. I would see little blurbs here and there. But it was like, this is odd. It was like stepping into I don't know, not a utopia. I can't think of the word, but it's like dystopia. Yeah, it was like a dystopian thing of like, how could venture, which is supposed to be so risk-taking and so brave and innovative, how can they be so far behind? even private equity. I mean, private equity is no picnic, but I've definitely been in rooms with hundreds of Black private equity fund managers. And I've been in rooms with dozens, if not less, Black VCs. And that's only been more recent. So to me, it was, not only is it like the right thing to do because I'm a gay Black woman and I feel like you're missing, you know, it's not cool to do that, but I feel like most of the people I know who are doing something, like when I think of a group of people, when you say what's an entrepreneur, when you Google what CEO, I don't know if it's still the case, but when you Google CEO like a year ago, it just brought up Zuckerberg, Bezos, Elon Musk, and it was just like a sea of white, like a wall of white men. And when you say entrepreneur, CEO, to me, the first thing I like, the picture I come up with is very, very diverse. And it's like a white man here, it's a Black woman there, it's a Latinx man there, it's a queer person over here, this, you know, this and that. And I was like, that to me is more reality than this. It was almost like it was like Silicon Valley was airbrushed. It was almost like it was supposed to be this, it's somebody's dream of an aesthetic that they like. And when I say somebody, I mean, it has to be some sort of racist. Like, you know, it's somebody's like boys club or some sort of like, let's keep them out of this. And I just don't subscribe to that. And I thought, well, that's not right. It doesn't make sense. And we have plenty, but then if you think about it, opportunity. Exactly. I said like in 2012, 13, I was just like, what if every Black founder in America knew one, not only one person, but there was one person who they all called. You know, it's like the square is a rhombus. The rhombus is a square, but a rhombus is squares and a rhombus. Anyway, it's like I want there to be plenty of us. But what that person who figures this out real quick is going to be interesting. Now, I don't have every Black founder in America calling me, but what, 80% know to call? Know that they can? Right. That's pretty incredible.
It's a big opportunity.
I would have never imagined it, but I did imagine it. I wouldn't have imagined it for myself. But I said, I was just sitting there like, what if someone did? That'd be cool. If somebody was like, that would be like the bat phone. Like you just know, call this person. They're the fixer. And then the opportunity would be, yes, you would see a lot of companies that may not work out, but if you had that patience and you really cared, and you were there I looked at it like a garden. Like put in the work across the garden, something's gonna flourish. And you can't do it by saying, oh, from over here, I'm just gonna think that one's gonna do well and that one's gonna do well, so I'm gonna spend my time on these two. You have to put 100 in the garden and work with them the same over and over again through many seasons. And then you're going to see this goes this high and this one goes even higher. And this one didn't work out so well, but guess what? Next time they go out, they come right back to you. And maybe that, you know, Stuart Butterfield, he says 2 companies failed before he got to Slack.
Right. Yeah.
Don't you know, I'm looking at these companies that haven't done so well at the portfolio. I'm like, call me when the next one happens.
Exactly.
So that's how I was looking. It was my strategy around it. It went from being an observation to then a strategy when nobody else would do it.
Basically, yeah, a lot of people seeing it as a big problem, but you looking at it as like, hey, this is an opportunity, and also, you know, being yourself. And going back to like just being yourself, it's like, you know, you probably did step on a lot of toes, like just like being in that space, you know, and probably still are stepping on toes, but like you're doing it just, you know, unapologetically. You know, like what would you say to founders who are entering into these rooms, who still want to be themselves and still want to be their authentic self, but you know, kind of they're not, you know, represented in the you know, in the bigger picture. So what would you kind of tell those people?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I don't try to be a bulldozer. I'm never going to be trying to, like, for the sake of it, just like kicking everybody out the way and look at me. So I think there's a kindness that's important. That's incredibly important. If I don't weigh things in different percentages, but if I did, that would be one of the main things: kindness overall, because you're gonna have to be kind to yourself. You have to be kind to others to like get through all these years and years and years of this mess that is the start of life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about like overcompensating to the point where you're just like this, you know, man eater or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like that. Like, I'm going to play with the big boys, so I'm going to just be ruthless and sharky.
Right.
But it's not shrinking yourself either, because there's just one of you in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's one of you in the whole world. You talk about leverage. That's leverage. And so why would you want to get rid of the only leverage sometimes you have? When you don't have that much money and you don't have that many connections and you're just starting out and you're just trying to find your way, and this experiment isn't working the way you thought it would, you don't have that much leverage. And being honest with yourself about that is really important. But the leverage you do have that nobody can take away from you is in your authenticity and in your uniqueness. Right. And then it becomes in your knowledge base, which I talk about in the book, and then it becomes in your conviction and not straying from that. Like I often encourage people. I talk about it in the book by saying, you know, use your voice and share your voice, but it's not just about sharing your voice like in a heartwarming way. I often encourage people to have firm opinions about things, even if it's not popular, and do so boldly and out loud, because that will then it's just like such a basic thing to me, like that will attract stuff to you. Right. Because you can, anytime I see somebody who's like middle of the road, like they never talk out of line, they always go with the flow, they never speak on current events, never, I'm like, they're probably going to be so safe. They probably have a really good 401k plan. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's cool. But they're not going to like soar through space.
Yeah.
With this one lifetime.
It's a quote that you use. What is it? It's the be yourself so that somebody else is looking for. I don't know.
So it's be yourself so that the people looking for you can find you.
Congrats. You made it to the midpoint of this episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Back to the Basics podcast. Before we get to the second half of this episode, we first want to give a big shout out to our awesome sponsors. So check them out.
Nobody has it figured out. I'm sorry, if you go into a Fortune 500 company right now and you spend a day with some of their executives, you will be like, wait, what? You don't, that's how you do your process? Like, how did y'all make it this far? Right. Nobody has it fully figured out. And so if you can't be flexible in your thinking, your creativity, we get really, really in love with our ideas. Like, I know for me, like even yesterday, for the past week, I've been saying one thing. I even made a deck about it. Like, you know, I've been saying one thing for like a week straight, and I've been saying it really loudly, you know, in these rooms. And then I had a conversation yesterday, and I started thinking, I was like, let me do the math on that. And I started doing the math differently. And I said, okay, let me be devil's advocate and flip it. And just say for a moment that that I am a genius, but these other person are geniuses too. You know, these other people are geniuses. Let's just say that for a second I'm wrong. And my mom is here. Mrs. Sims is here. She knows that I'm always right. So she's going to be surprised by this. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm going to come out as not right about this. But I said, let me just say it for a second. And I looked at it and I said, so it's not 100% that I'm going to do this other thing, but I have it in my back pocket if I need it. And so when I go into this room on Friday, which I'm going to do and have this negotiation, I don't have just the one thing, you know, that, and if that doesn't work, it's done. And if I hadn't been flexible, and if I had been so stubborn, like I'm the only person who could possibly be right about this, then that would handcuff me. And there's no need for that. So inflexibility is your own downfall. That's your bad. And that's something you can work on personally without anybody even knowing. You can work on that internally. And then also just kind of like, I think the number one thing that catches people, and it's before and after they start the company. And so like, you know, not even just the down, like it not doing well, but just like even in the process is you really you find like 90, I find that 90% of the people haven't gone through like a full diagnostic of why they are doing this particular company. Most people start at like a surface level, and it's not to say anything bad about the person. It's just like, it's almost like a by rote. It's almost like automatic. They'll start with, okay, in the past, people have started companies. All right. Okay. Let me think about what I would be good at. Okay. I like this. And I did this other thing. Let me see about this. And then they go. But they don't do this deep dive root of why me? Why this? Why now? What happens if 5 years go by and it doesn't do well? How am I going to feel about that? What do I want out of life? What kind of people do I want surrounding me during this journey? What does success look like for me? What's going to, they don't take this deeper thing because it's almost like this, if you're not an entrepreneur, you're not really nothing, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, man, I'd much rather have someone who is a very thoughtful person who took an extra 6 months of their lives to really think through why they're doing something, because if you really meant to do something, it keeps finding you, right? It keeps finding you. And if you're going to go through all this heartache of raising and talking to 100 people to get one person to say yes and that, wouldn't you want to put that energy towards something that you have already figured out? This is it. This is a thing for me. This is it. Not that it's the only thing that'll work and that my legitimacy is banking on it, but it's like, I want to go in the weeds with this. I'll go through it for this, for sure. Yeah, so you need to know that about yourself to be able to sell it to anybody else on a beyond surface level way.
And I was going to say, it sounds like, you're very founder focused in regards to just people that you invest in. So what is a typical, I guess, profile of person that you're looking at, or company that you're looking at when you're looking like, hey, I want to invest in this person? What is that like?
Yeah, there's no typical. You can go to backstagecapital.com right now and see it's not typical. It's across industries, it's across locations, it's across profiles, backgrounds, strengths, and weaknesses. There's no typical, but there's a through line. There are a few things that you can say. You put all these people in the room, what do they have in common? There's a through line of like I said before, it finds you. A lot of not everyone, because life is what it is, but the ones that I think will do the best and have done the best and whether the company has not made it or they have made it, will ultimately do the best are the ones who they're following that, they're listening to that, they're hearing that calling, they're hearing it. Because you can start a company. If you just want to be in a company to like have a good return, like exit, you want to have the excitement, you want to have the TechCrunch headline, you can do all that without having all the headache by just being one of the first 10 employees at another company. Right? Yeah. So we're talking about founders. I'm talking about founders who, and it's okay to do that. There's no one better or worse in that scenario. There's a good case to be made of doing that a couple of times in your 20s and 30s and 40s, setting yourself up and then going out for something. But anyway, the founders are people who you just see it. You see that aura around them. And I know that's going to sound kind of hokey, and I'm not that kind of like spiritual, I'm not that kind of person, but I do see it, like they glow with it. It is their life's work. It is driving them. It is their North Star, all of that. They embody it.
And then you can tell it was not. So
and you can tell the one. I tell you what, there are a couple of people I know, like a couple of people in our portfolio who are just really good salespeople. Yeah. They should, in my opinion, and that both the ones I'm thinking of, their companies have not done so well. They should just be like the head of development for a growing startup, because they can sell. But selling and convincing somebody is different than like drawing them to you
Mm-hmm.
And let him follow. Like, I'm going to be have a magnetic force
Mm.
towards Don Dixon.
Oh yeah.
Magnetic force towards Harold at Bandwagon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Magnetic force to Jessica Matthews. Like, I'm going to be like, take me with
Right.
you, please.
Like
Instead of, okay, you're telling me logically what I'm supposed to be feeling.
mm-hmm.
I don't know. And that kind of person, the reason they're like that is a combination of things. And one of them is they figured out their why.
Mm.
Because right now, like, I could, a lot of people really want Backstage to win.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most people realize, like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm serious about this. I've been around for 9 years. Like, this isn't a fly by night.
Mm-hmm.
You want to see how it turns out. After all this, you want to see how it turns out. That's what you want in a founder. And it's okay if you're not that person today or yet.
Mm.
It is okay.
One big question I want to ask you is, with the current social climate, I'm talking about pandemic, politics, racial injustices, that just an economic downturn. Like, what is your advice to give to first-time founders or just like startup founders who are like building a company through all of this that's going on? Like, do you see it as just like an opportunity? Do you see it as like a negative thing? Like, what is your suggestions in regards to navigating their success through building a company through, what the world hasn't seen in hundreds of years?
Has never seen
Right,
this exact thing. Now, we have never been through, the things that we see in the history books,
Yeah.
certain things,
You read
the
about
Vikings coming and with the swords and all that. We've never been through that, so we'll be okay. I would say now more than ever, what I just said before is important in my opinion, because that resilience is gonna be so more necessary than ever.
Mm.
And it's also okay to sort of say, oh, okay, this wasn't really for me, so like I'm gonna pivot out. But if you're in it and you want to be in it, I would say don't get too caught up on think pieces about like where the future of work is going, or what this theme will be, or what will emerge after this. Because again, we're going back to that really true tenet, is that nobody has it figured out.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that with the advice I gave before about having a strong opinion, but they don't, their strong opinion doesn't mean you have to follow it. What does the world look like to you in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
What does that world look like? And when you say it out loud, do people laugh? Do people say, oh, I don't know what you're talking about? That might be a good sign, because that means they're not seeing it. Mm-hmm. Do you know how many people asked me in 2014 and 13, mm-hmm. wait, are there enough women starting companies that you can invest in?
Oh man.
What?
Yeah.
Like, the thing that it sounds so, of course, mm-hmm. of course there are. Of course there are Black people starting companies. Of course. Mm-hmm. It sounds crazy until it doesn't. Mm. I was laughed out of the room when I told this one woman that I was gonna invest in 100 companies by 2020. Mm. It was, and I'm gonna say it now, I don't even have to, it was an angel list. Mm-hmm. And I went in for this meeting and I was so excited. I'm like, I'm gonna start a thing on angel list 2015. Mm-hmm. And then we sat down, we talked, we did all this. And I said, yeah, I'm going to invest in 100 underrepresented founders by 2020. Mm-hmm. And she just started laughing. And she was like, yeah, come back when you're more realistic.
Oh, man.
And I tried to in 2018 when I invested in my 100th company, but she wasn't there anymore. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like, where is she at now? We need a recap of what she thinks now.
Yeah, but it's, that was her opinion, and I kind of understand it, because who am I? Came out of nowhere. What am I talking about? 100 companies, like, mm-hmm. But that just means like I had been saying that I had been knowing that for years. Mm-hmm. Man, I've been saying it out loud, but I've been knowing it. Imagine if I had just let her laughter or let someone else's. Most of it was like pat on the head, like, oh, good luck to you, like. I can't help you, but good luck. What if I had let that really resonate as if it were some sort of fact? their opinion was somehow a fact to me. So I wouldn't sit around and think about, well, okay, this article in Fortune or wherever says that these are the top 5 companies that are going to really prosper in 2025 because of COVID. That's like a spring break. Everybody's going to go there. Everybody's going to go there. You're going to find the island, the cozy island that you may be on for a while by yourself, but you it's all you. And that's what you want to live in a little bit. You know, you want to get in that pocket of it. And that can be just into how you philosophize around the company you have today, or maybe in how you iterate on what the company could become or even change to.
Yeah. Thank you again. I'll say just like one piece of advice that you would give just for people to walk away with. What would that be?
Just do a lot of research. Like, no, I know that sounds like just simple, but that's one of the things that people walk into investor, like they walk into these rooms and there's so many other things against them. But if on top of that you can't control, right? But if on top of that, you in fact don't know your numbers, or you in fact don't know the market, or you don't know much about your competition, you don't have a leg to stand on saying, oh, they didn't like it because I'm Black. Or you can't say that. You know, so I'm always going to be like, just give them every reason to just be bust every myth that this person has in their head, so that you're undeniable. Be undeniable.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Back to the Basics, powered by Thrive. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share this show with your fellow first-time founders. You can find this episode along with resources and tools discussed at squareoneschool.com/content. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Back to the Basics.